From the origins of the Jackson 5 to the release of the Bad album, Michael takes a look at the rise of the King of Pop.
I'm going to start off right away talking about anything done about Michael Jackson will always be controversial. We all know his past or what he did or didn't do and all that kind of stuff. So you knew anything they were going to do about Michael, whether they went into it or if they left it out, anything like that, it's going to be very controversial. Even doing a film about him is going to be very controversial. So this is a film that you can kind of go into in kind of two different ways, because you can look at it as being a loving tribute to the music and the musician that was Michael Jackson, or looking at it as kind of a skirting reality a little bit type of biopic, because it does kind of skip a lot of the stuff that happened, because it starts off in 1966 with, Joseph Jackson getting the boys going, very hard father, disciplinarian, making sure that the boys are doing what he wants them to do, because they're gonna either you're a loser or you're a winner, and that's all that really matters to him. And it starts off and goes through that all the way up through his Bad album. And originally it was going to be including the first accusation against him in the early 90s, but they didn't learn until after they filmed all of it that there was something within that lawsuit that prevented them from ever mentioning or doing anything about that. So they ended up having doing substantial reshoots and changing, because the film was over 4 hours when it first was cut with all of that extra in there, and ended up being 2 hours after they were done.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that, and it's a very time-specific piece, right? And I think that's where some of the controversy with some of the initial reactions to the film are coming in. It's one part of a two-part biopic, basically. As you learn by the end of the film, we jokingly said, Michael Jackson will return in Avengers Doomsday, because they left kind of a little bit of an open message.
I mean, they do that tagline, like, his story will continue. We both looked at each other. It's like, Michael Jackson will return in Avengers Doomsday.
And
it
fit. It fit with the time that the movie came out, which, if you're watching this a couple years from now, thank you. But, you may not get the reference then. But, yeah, it's intended to be a two-part biopic. So we get part one here. It's all the way up, like you said, through the release of the Bad album. And this movie really focuses on Michael's relationship with his family, specifically his father, and his relationship with his father is kind of the major through line that they're telling throughout this entire story. But you get all of the iconic early Michael Jackson moments. You get the early performances of the Jackson 5. You get to the point where Michael's ready to break out and releases his Off the Wall record, which is absolutely brilliant and fantastic as well. And you get to see some of his, creative thought process there and how easily some things came to him. And Michael was notoriously an artist who knew specifically what he wanted to sound like, what he wanted to do, how he wanted his music to be presented. And you get that. You get a little bit of that in here. And I gotta say, just off rip, Jaafar Jackson does an absolutely phenomenal job portraying young adult Michael Jackson here. He's Jermaine's son, so he's biologically connected anyway, but I've found myself at times not realizing he's playing Michael Jackson, because he really does embody Michael through so much throughout this. He looks so much like Michael Jackson did. It's obviously genetically that makes sense, but just how much he does look and embody Michael to a T in this movie. His performance is absolutely outstanding. You get him doing the performances. You get him doing the choreography, the iconic Michael Jackson choreography, because you get several musical performances in this movie. And he just does such an amazing job there. And since this is kind of a through line about Michael and his relationship with his father and growing up as hard as he did and as abused as he was, and how that took its effect on him mentally and emotionally, and just the upbringing that he had, I will say Coleman Domingo is also fantastic as Joseph Jackson. Like, you really wanted to hate him in this movie.
Oh, yeah. When someone did a really good job, that you want to go into the screen and punch him because he's being that big of a jerk that you're like, oh, Good job, Coleman.
And he did a fantastic. Coleman Domingo is an outstanding actor.
He was great.
And he just does a phenomenal job as Joseph here. And you get that loving relationship that he has with his mother, who's also played by Nia Long, who just, I can't look at her and not think of the movie Friday, just loving it as much as it does now. She's playing Michael Jackson's mother in this movie. And that just shows my age, and I can feel the hairs on my face getting whiter by the minute here. But it was such a well-told story about the celebration of his music while touching on the reality of some of the things he dealt with growing up, too. In a lot of these biopics, you are getting a sensationalized version of their life. Like, it's not as... Most of these aren't as hard-hitting and gripping and dealing with all of the intricate, dirty details of their lives. There are movies that do dive into that, but this is definitely not one of those. Like, you do deal with, like you said, the emotional abuse of his dad and how that affected him, and then you get to see Michael portrayed in as much of a positive light as you can here, because he's meant to be the antagonist of the story. Or not the antagonist, the protagonist of the story. And he's meant to be the hero, but you just get that love of his music like just pours out of this movie. And the best way I can describe it for people, not to go on too much of a tangent, is if you are a fan of Michael Jackson, the artist or performer, you're gonna love this movie because it's a lot of fun. If you're going in with any type of negative, preconceived things about Michael Jackson, you may not get as much out of this film if you're going in looking for something specific to be touched on, because it is such a hyper-focused part of his life up until a certain point, and not a little bit later when you deal with all of the, some would say his mentally unstable portion of his life, if you want to call it that, or just all the crazy stuff that starts happening to him and goes around him later on in his life. It just doesn't touch on that. And we'll see if part 2 does dive into that as much as they can legally. But yeah, if you're a fan of Michael, you're gonna love this movie.
As I said early on, it's one that you can look at two drastically different ways. If you go into the film just wanting to see a tribute to the musician, not the person, really. I mean, you do get quite a lot, but you're not really getting anything new or different that you may not have known about Michael and his family. And the abuse and other stuff was very well known as in the Jackson estate, and his family had control over a lot of the story and stuff. So, there's going to be some stuff they left out. Even with, not even just with Michael, there's a lot with Joseph that was left out because he had multiple affairs. He fathered a child outside of his marriage. There was, Catherine filed for divorce a couple times, but the religion stopped him. They don't get into any of that stuff. They do paint him as the abuser, but you don't go in as deep. It's very much of a kind of a skim the surface of the major moment type of movies. Like you jump around pretty quickly. I do think the pacing of it was a little problematic because it was just kind of like a almost like compilation that you're like, all right, let's do ABC and then we get the Jackson. Because I think the Jackson 5 part in the beginning, and I do want to come back to this in a moment, was probably the longest straight stretch that we got without any like full major cuts. We jumped in time, but it was still dealing with the kids in a certain way, and then you get a concert performance and you jump to another time frame, and then you get a little bit of plot and story, then you get another concert, and then a little plot and story and another concert. So it does kind of jump in that way that you get used to it, but it can be a little bit jarring to the storytelling that it doesn't spend a whole lot of time on some plot points because it wants to get back to the music. And of course there's a ton of great music to go through with the Jackson 5, the Jacksons with Michael Jackson. But I will second Jaafar Jackson was really incredible. Like, most everybody knows who Michael Jackson is, and he was a very complicated person, not only because of his lifestyle and everything else, but his mannerisms, how he spoke, how he moved and dancing, and the voice with singing and his voice with speaking was very unique and different. So to have Jaafar be able to pretty much nail every aspect of it, because you have plenty of street performers and others out there who are doing the moonwalk and doing Michael Jackson impersonation. So it could come off very much so that you're just doing an impersonation of Michael Jackson. and you're not actually giving us Michael. Jafar gave us Michael. Like, he embodied him. He did sing. They did kind of mix masters and re-recording or remasters of Michael Jackson songs in with his vocals, but he did a lot of the heavy lifting here, and it was a really brilliant performance. Like, if you go back to Rami Malek with Bohemian Rhapsody and trying to take on Freddie Mercury, this was even a bigger task for someone who wasn't even an actor. Like, this is his first acting gig.
Yeah, crazy.
Is taking on portraying his uncle.
It's like the biggest pop star in the history of pop music. Like, it's crazy how good he does, and that speaks to the power of his performance. Like, I literally at some points had to snap myself back into reality. Like, I'm not watching Michael Jackson perform on the screen here. Like, it's insane how much he embodied, the spirit of his uncle, and just gave an epic performance here.
Especially the concert performances. Like, it was
incredible.
Like watching. Like,
incredible.
Getting to see the moonwalk for the first time with Billie Jean played on stage, and getting to see those iconic moments of the music videos and the stage shows. Like, he just nailed all the movements, nailed everything.
And it leaned a lot into that creative genius aspect of him, and that's kind of how they chose to portray him here, which he was a creative genius. Like, he was very hands-on with producing his music. He knew exactly how he wanted stuff to sound and how he wanted to sing it, and some of the little, like you said, mannerisms. I'll always laugh at the portions of him like recording in a booth and them telling him not to move as much, but that's how he made his magic recording, though. He was a performer. He felt it in his entire body, and it just does such a good job of sensationalizing that through celebration of his incredible music, and you get that in spades in this film. Like, I just found myself at times just looking around our theater, even like during the performance, and you see a bunch of people just dancing in their seats, and just having a great time about that. I know you want to talk about the theater experience.
I don't know if you caught people laughing at me because I knew the Thriller music video was coming up, so I did the dance, and the whole like row behind us started laughing because they spotted me doing it.
Yep.
But yeah, we had a very vocal. But in the way they did it here was okay. We've always been a big proponent about not talking and not ruining the experience by being too loud and over the top, but they were into the film. It was reacting to moments. It was clapping to big moments, especially when like Michael stands up to his dad or his mom stands up to his dad, or just kind of those big moments. You can get the big songs. They're dancing, they're reacting and all that. And that's the movie experience we like, because it's about the film and not you talking about the lunch that you had 2 weeks ago that wasn't very good and left you gassy. We don't need that, story in the middle of a theater. And we've had some of those conversations from some older groups that have been in the movies with us, and it's been crazy. But yeah, it was a really interesting theatrical viewing experience, because you had people of all ages going through this film and watching it and experiencing it and just reacting and moving and going. And with Michael Jackson songs, it's kind of hard not to sit there and just kind of start bobbing and moving your head and getting into it, because that's what made him so big. Is he kind of connected with your soul and music in a way that just made him so special, that hadn't really been done at that point. And that's what the film does well, is really just highlighting the musician and the creative genius, as you said, that was Michael Jackson. Because it was, you're talking about when he's first putting out his albums, what was Off the Wall early, like 81?
Yeah, like late.
I know Thriller was 83. Yeah. And so, you're talking about late 70s, early 80s, probably not the biggest time for him to make that kind of different change, because you get a little bit of funk and soul and pop, but that you're getting into rock, and you're kind of blending genres a little bit, as kind of Queen did during that time as well and stuff. But it was, it really spoke well about the music and the heart behind the music and the family aspect of Michael's troubles, but also his strength. It was, it was part of his problem, but also part of his just strength, because it did touch on lightly of the aspect that he never really felt like he fit in, that he felt like an outcast. That's why he ends up basically getting a zoo of animals, because he saw the animals as his friends, because he wasn't really able to make friends.
Well, no, he became like a global superstar as a kid. He was like one of the OG really famous like kid performers, really, if you think about it. Not that there weren't like famous young performers before them. Obviously, you can go way back to like Shirley Temple and stuff like that, but like internationally famous, like a mega music star with the Jackson 5 being the young one in the group. And I love the whole 10-year-old but say you're 8 kind of thing, just to kind of lie. Everybody lies about their age and not in show business, like, you know,
Yep.
or just like little stuff like that. But like, just imagine that level of fame you get as a youngster combined with you know, the abusive upbringing and, you know, everything else that he had to deal with, you know, growing up. And how could it not affect your growth to becoming an adult, where he even says it, he's just like, all the kids just want to do is stand around and take pictures with me because I am famous. Like, they don't really care about who I am as a person. Like, and you don't get to have that socialized upbringing, which is why he you know, it helped shape who he became as an adult too. And that's why he always felt like he had the youthful energy and all that stuff. And I don't want to take it down like any type of dark or controversial path here with there, but they do kind of touch on it a little bit as to why he was the way he was. I fully believe that, and this is just going to sound reckless for me to say, but I've always kind of felt he may have even been a little bit on the spectrum too.
I think a lot of people, ADHD, spectrum, something on there, which of course we'll never know, but it did feel like there was something a little... Now, of what we know nowadays, it definitely feels like there's something in that space that he potentially could have had. But at that time, there was no real testing or looking at it.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show the incredible soulful musician that he was too, and the way that his music connected with everybody. And that was kind of a central message too that they really wanted to get across with Michael here too, was, you know, just how his music affected. He wanted to make music for everybody, because they do kind of loosely deal with like his pushing to get Billie Jean onto MTV and to get his music out there when MTV historically wasn't playing, you know, African American artists or, you know, non-white musicians on MTV, because it was all rock and roll and bubblegum pop stuff. And, you know, just that whole scene there was a ton of fun given the cameo we got. That I wasn't
expecting that.
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen the film yet, but it was a fun one. If you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, it also you know, just
collecting cameo roles here, playing the same type of character but in completely different ways.
It was a lot of fun there too. But I mean, I agree though. Like, from a film perspective, it does suffer from a little bit of pacing issues, because it does feel very stop and go. Like, you're going to slow down to a crawl, and then we're going to fast-paced jump to this. And, you know, it didn't spend, like, I know one of your things was it didn't spend as much time in the thriller era as it could have. But in my opinion, the thriller part of it is just, we know what that is. Like, you know, we know
majority of his big hits are from there, and we got most of them, but it was just kind of quick jumps through his area. It was it's a greatest hits.
Yeah.
Is what they did with this film.
Literally
they just went from the Jackson 5's greatest hits to Michael Jackson's greatest hits, and that's what they went through, because he's got some smaller little albums that he did and other stuff like that they didn't touch on or even acknowledge. But, you know, you got the major albums in there. Mine was more about seeing more of the Thriller music video, just because it was awesome to see a little bit of the behind the scenes and what he was doing, and it was just showed again just how good Jaafar was to be able to recreate that music video feeling almost to a T, that they cut every aspect of the dance, the movement, the lighting. Of course, you know, being filmed in the 80s to being filmed in 2025 or 24 or wherever it was filmed looks quite different because of that, but it was still just really cool to see them go through that. Yeah. I do want to, like I said, I wanted to jump back to the Jackson 5 and touch on Giuliano Valdi, who played the young Michael Jackson, was also phenomenal.
Fantastic too, yes.
Because that's a really big task as well, to do young Michael, because of how high-pitched his voice is and the mannerisms and because he is a kid going through the music industry, but also dealing with the abuse from his dad. And I think he probably won't get any accolades or award nominations or anything from it, just because he's playing a younger version of the main actor. He did phenomenal.
Awesome.
He gets huge kudos from me to be able to pull off, because you do spend, and it's probably the longest stretch between like kind of music videos and concerts of the Jackson 5. So you got quite a bit of him as young Michael going through, and you're getting
spends a decent chunk of time in the movie,
but he was just really phenomenal and fantastic to be able to sing and pull off the dances and the mannerisms and do everything that he did as young Michael, because the Jackson 5 became so huge so quickly, and you had all the different TV appearances and concert appearances and doing little fairs, but also doing little dive bars and strip club or whatever it was that they were performing at. Like, he was able to really pull off something pretty incredible as playing young Michael. I really hope people see just how good he was to pull that off.
Yeah, definitely worth giving him his flowers, because, the Jackson 5 music is just as incredible. Like, they had just an amazing collection of music as well, because you get some of those performances too, where you see him drawing his influences into his performances. You have him mimicking performers that he sees and just kind of taking it and putting his own twist on it, becoming like the younger version of the performer he grew into. Like, it was awesome to see, like, all of the dance moves and the performance stuff, and just the vocal stuff, that just incredible for him to sing like that as young as he was. Is just unbelievable, man. And he did such a good job of portraying that. And, you can't go the whole movie without noticing just, like you said, it's not everybody in the Jackson family that gets represented. Obviously, the most notable absence is Janet. Janet's not in this film at all, obviously, with, her declining to be portrayed in the film. But
like, not even a stand-in or just being in the background. They just completely left out that she existed.
And that sucks, because, Janet is obviously a global pop icon as well. Like, she's had an incredible career too, but her not being in there is a bit of a miss in my opinion. But I get why, you have to consent to be in the movie. But you see all the influences on Michael as a performer growing up, and, the time that he spent, that didn't always get as publicized as others, like spending time with, sick kids in the hospital and doing all the stuff like that. They do a really good job of portraying him in the positive light that way. Like, just how much that means to him and how important it was. And I love that they touched on him donating his Pepsi check to the burn victims unit, because they do deal with the, the hair on fire incident from the Pepsi commercial that was infamous as well, and how that kind of led him down on his, medical addiction that he dealt with throughout a good chunk of his life as well. Like,
pretty much the rest of his life after that.
Yeah, and it just kind of like sees the kickoff to that too, and how that incident really affected him mentally moving forward. And it was just such a powerfully told story that is not devoid of its pacing issues, but it really does at the end of the day celebrate the man, the performer that was Michael Jackson. And like I say, if you're a fan of his music, you're gonna love this movie. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. It's not a perfect biopic. A lot of biopics, they do change some things around to fit a narrative story a little bit better, and I think they did fine with what they did. So I think they got a home run in my opinion. If you're a fan of his music like I am, like I absolutely loved it and had a great time.
Yeah, and I did too, but it is that aspect of me that I still look at the two different ways of trying to look at it, and that's going to affect my scoring with it as well. Sure. Because as a tribute to the musician, it's phenomenal. Like, Jaafar is fantastic. The song recreations, music video, concert recreations, all that aspect is great, but it does lose some points for me as well in the aspect of it is a lot more sensationalized than a lot of the biopics we've gotten lately. Like, you left out a lot of things with the family that was a little bit darker. You didn't really touch on any relationships with Michael at all. It was all about his family. You left out, which I don't know if you really needed, but it would have been fun to get a nod, like The Wiz and some of the other acting things he did. It ended before we even got Moonwalker, which had some of his, with a bad album and at that kind of tail end of his career where it ended the film. It kind of felt a little odd that they left out Moonwalker with just how, I guess you could say, interesting and strange that short film was, because we also spin off video games off of that, and you had some big hits off of that, including A Smooth Criminal and a bunch of other stuff that you had with that. But it was a little odd that it ended with that, because, like I said, we know that originally was going to go into 1994, 93, 94 when the first accusations happened, and they had to cut a lot of stuff. And I wonder if that ended up on the cutting room floor, and that could be something that we get in that potential second film. Like, they had to cut about 30% of the film that they had filmed. So some of that can be used, and then they have to re-film, film a lot of new stuff. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle the second film, because it's the dark and the dirty stuff. And that's where I'm kind of looking at both aspects. Like, they did phenomenally with the music, but they skirted reality a bit on Michael and his family and other things like that. Does that bode well for how they would handle the darker aspects of him? Because while he was acquitted of everything, and I don't want to go too deep in that part of it, I'm not getting into the politics and everything else of that, it's a dark time.
Sure.
Majority of, because I mean, that's 93 through 2005, really, with the accusations with stuff. You have 3 to 4 more albums that are released that weren't shown. So you still got a lot of music to show, but there's a lot of darkness with just with his condition getting worse and his skin lightening and how media and press and everyone treated him, to more plastic surgeries. But as I mentioned, since they left out relationships in this first half, are they going to touch on any of those? Because he has multiple marriages, and you have some significant marriages with Lisa Marie Presley and others like that. You just wonder, as a music tribute, it's fantastic, but as a telling of his life, there's a lot to kind of be desired of truth telling that makes me a little leery about, should they really go back and do a second one? I'm not trying to have them hide any truth or information. I'm just worried that they might be doing that when they do the film.
And it could, and that's a stylistic choice in the way they're presenting this film, because it does walk that line of it being an actual biopic or a musical film, like, because it does lean heavily more into musical than biopic. Like, it does, because you can't not tell some of those stories, but it doesn't get as granular as they could, and that's the line that they walk, and you got to just kind of judge it on the merits of that, I think. But like you said, it's all a matter of perspective, and I think that's why you're seeing such a wide variety of reactions to this movie, where like people that are like film critics and things that look at it like in that light are being a little bit harsher on it versus audience scores and fan reaction to it, which has been absolutely glowing about the
going
movie.
for the music.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like, what lens are you choosing to look and grade this film through? And this is kind of like the second type of those films that we've had in the last few times we've done film reviews here, where it's like, okay, how are you looking at it based on this versus this? And it could affect. So I'm really excited to see what you have to say when it comes to your final grading of this, because we might be a little bit apart on this. We'll see.
Yeah, there's potential for it, because like I said, I have that kind of, I can see the perspective from the critics, because if you're going to the biopic, well, you're wanting to kind of see more of the person and behind the music, which we get with a lot of these biopics. And they also do usually run the gambit of taking you kind of to the end of their story, which this didn't. This kind of has a weird stopping point. Like, the Bad era was huge and big for him, but it was literally the last scene of the movie, and that's all we got of it was one kind of stage performance heading into it, and it just kind of stopped there. And then we get the Avengers Doomsday that he'll return message after. It was just, it's a big story to kind of tell because of how much music he has and everything else, but it's also
multiple
just
decade career that he had, and it's like, I don't mean to jump in on you, but I'll see that and raise you some of the other recent musical biopics that we've looked at and covered. Like, obviously with Bohemian Rhapsody, it is a good majority of his life. It's a good majority of Freddie Mercury's life up until a certain point. But then you go see the Bob Dylan biopic with Timothée Chalamet that we saw, that is just a very small portion of Bob Dylan's career. You see the Bruce Springsteen biopic that we went and saw with Jeremy Allen White, that was just a snippet of his career for like one album cycle. And then the same thing with the Bob Marley biopic, which was just, around one very specific time in his life as well. So it all depends on, that goes to add to a little bit of the perspective here.
It's all how you look at this film is what you get out of it.
They're having to do what is essentially 2 movies in a 4-decade career of 4+ decade career of an artist.
Potentially more than 2 films. There's rumors and talks that it could be,
I hope not,
2 or 3 films total.
I hope they don't stretch it that far. I hope they at least stop with 2, but there's so much to cover because he's been in the spotlight for so long. It's crazy that, you know, it wasn't marketed as a hyper-focused part of his life. You're getting like essentially the first half of his life. Now you're getting kind of the back end of his life in the second film, and I hope that's where they keep it. But we'll see. As you know, they do in Hollywood, they tend to drag things a little further and make 17 iterations of a film, and we'll see if they do it that way. I hope not. I hope they stop at the second one, because there's still, like you said, some great music to get to, and they just stopped with him doing the Bad tour, so it doesn't even fully get into the Bad album. But yeah, there is so much from that point of his life forward that they could touch on, and it does get very dark, so you're wondering if they do make that tonal shift a little bit to that, and you see a little bit of that darkness in this film, and we're not like making light of it or anything, but it is so much more hyper focused on the music and the performer and the message behind his music and his connection with people. And you know, a lot of it's with his relationship with his father and standing up to his dad, and that was kind of the through line of this one. And we'll see where they go with the second one, if they do get a chance to dive into more of the darker stuff, and his fame and popularity takes its toll on him, and he's so much time in the spotlight, and he's even more isolated, because once you reach that absurd level of superstardom, you have absolutely no privacy. And he had to deal with that from a very young age. So we'll see where they go in the second one. I'm wondering if there is a tonal shift, or it does keep kind of the lighter, like they still touch on it, but they don't go as granular as they could. We'll see. I mean, that time will tell. But
and that's going to be debated by every person in every aspect of what they do with that second film. Because if you don't dive too deep in the darker stuff, then you're not trying to be real or genuine or honest with things. Or if you go too dark, but are you still being genuine and honest? Or you make it even more crazy on the other aspect, because you went very kind of, I mean, overall, like you said, you deal with Joseph's abuse and the hardships that Michael had with being a kid thrown into the spotlight and being abused by his dad and everything else. But for the most part, it is a more kind of uplifting look at his life. And we know the second half of his life, because it ended, about around 30. He passed around at 50 years old. So you did get to see the big majority of the chunk. The later half is where his life got a lot crazier with things. And you did get Bubbles in here, and being a CGI chimp, which I forgot that Bubbles is still alive. And Bubbles is still, was donated to an animal sanctuary or something, and is living his best life. But I forgot, because I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, so Bubbles had to pass by now. No, Bubbles is like 45 years old now, and living in an animal sanctuary and stuff. But yeah, this movie is really about the lens that you go in to view it. As we've kind of said over and over here, that Michael is, in one part, a very brilliant musical tribute to the king of pop that just showed the insane artistry that he had with these music videos, the songs, the short films. Everything that he created had a really special touch, even though he had hardships to get there. But at the same time, you have something that is ignoring a lot of the realities of the darker, harsher moments of his life. So if you view it as just a loving tribute to his music, this is probably a 9 to almost 10 out of 10 in that aspect of it. But then when I look at the other side of it, where you are kind of glossing over some of the darker moments, and you're trying to make some aspects of him a little bit softer and better than it was, you're probably at a 6 or a 7 with the reality portion of this Bible. So I'm probably going to go, I'm still going to give it a pretty high. I'm going at an 8 with it, because I can't ignore how it glosses over reality and some of the darker, more bad aspects of Michael and his life. But for Jaafar's performance of being just absolutely incredible, of not just imitating or mimicking Michael, he was Michael Jackson in it. From young Michael Jackson being so fantastic as well to portray that Jackson 5 era of his life in such a brilliant way, to the performance as Joseph that made you really hate him.
So good.
Rightfully hate that man. He was so fantastic. It had such great performances. They redid the music videos and the concert part so well. I'm giving it an 8 overall, but you do have to go in with that lens of looking at it as just a tribute to the music and not a fully faithful telling of Michael Jackson.
Yeah, and we wound up not being that far off in our grading of this, because I'm giving it a 9. I'm giving it a 9 because I'm choosing to view it through the lens of being a fan of Michael Jackson, the musician, the creative. It does lose a point for me in the glossing of some of the finer details of it, but I think through the narrative that they're trying to tell with Michael in this, I'm fine with it as a tribute to the artist. It doesn't dismiss any of the very real stuff that happened to him. Like, honestly, it really doesn't, because it does. It's choosing to narratively, as a movie, follow the through line of his relationship with his father and finally standing up to him and being his own man and his artist. Now, on the flip side, how they follow up is just as important, because they do need... I feel like they would lose a lot more in the second film if they don't get a little bit deeper into how he evolved as a human being and a person, and all the stuff that wound up surrounding him, and some of the, as wilder as his personal life got after the Bad album, because you could still start by having a strong part of that, and some of the iconic videos that came out of that, like Smooth Criminal, like you said, and just some of the awesome stuff that can come from that era of his life as well. And you can still show the tributes to his other records and the later stuff that he did, while also keeping true to the narrative. Like, what narrative are they going to choose to have as the through line of the second movie is also very important. And we'll see if that movie winds up getting made. Spoiler alert, it probably will, because this movie is going to do probably very well at the box office, I would imagine. And we'll see how they tell that story. But yeah, 9, and it's just, man, Jaafar Jackson was so... You'd think he'd been acting for 15 years, the way he just embodied the role of his uncle. And it's just, I can't exaggerate it enough. The visual resemblance is striking in this
Especially
movie.
when they had to do, and whether it's CGI or prosthetics, that you did get some of the plastic surgery and changes to his nose in there, and it looked natural and real, and he kind of felt and embodied that. So like just the physical change of the hair to the nose job to the outfits, when they started going, you saw him really taking on the embodiment of what everybody saw on TV as Michael Jackson during that age.
Yeah, and it's just an unbelievable performance, like you said. Coleman Domingo was incredible in it. Young Michael Jackson, the young actor that played him in that, was phenomenal as well. Give him his flowers.
Yeah, Giuliano, I keep forgetting your name, but you were absolutely amazing in
brilliant
this movie.
in it too. Some really phenomenal performances in this, and I gotta say, I'm glad that we weren't too far away on grading on this, and I get it, because you could choose to take a harsher route and criticize this as a film, knowing the story of the person that it's about, as intimately as most people do, with him being the biggest pop star on the planet for as long as he was. Like, you just know all of the stories and the controversies and all of that, and there's a lot more meat on the bone that you could tell, and you can nitpick about that, but as what it is intended to be, and what I feel like it's intended to be, is just an homage to the king of pop and his incredible career, while also touching on some, keyword is some, of the very real things that he had to deal with in his life that kind of helped shape him, kind of the bigger story beats, I would say, and not all of the minute details that went into his life. They did a fantastic job of portraying that in this movie, and you're going to go, you're going to sing, you're going to dance, you're going to, sing along to the songs, and it does a very, very, very effective job of doing that. And for that, I had a great time seeing the film. It was so much fun. I was beaming when I got out of it, because it was fun. You're allowed to go and have a good, I don't know if you know this, but you can go and have a good time at a movie.
No.
It's crazy. You're allowed to go and enjoy a movie.
No.
Despite what the internet will tell you, you're allowed to go have a good time.
Well, like I said, I can be like, I had a little bit more of the critical part of it. Like I said, if I was going based off of an accurate telling of Michael Jackson's life, it's probably a 5, a 6. If you're not giving major props to the musical performances, is that 4 or 5 type of it, because it's not very accurate on things, and it does paint him in a better light in some aspects, and even kind of paints Joseph a little bit better than he really was. But Yeah, Jafar and Coleman, I believe both of them are going to be big names around award season with the Oscars and everything else too. I think Jafar probably might be a front runner right now for that lead Oscar just because he was that phenomenal of bringing, as I said, it is not an easy thing to get Michael's voice down and not sound like a caricature of him, and to get his dance moves down. Like, there's people who can mimic it, but you're not trying to mimic, you're trying to be him. You're trying to just getting every movement of the shoulders and the necks and the knees and the hips and the feet, and he just had all of that down. And then you go into the look aspect of just how often he changed his look and the plastic surgery and all the other stuff that he had to just kind of channel from his uncle. Again, he was like 12 years old when his uncle passed away, so he probably got some time with him, but it had to be challenging and different and difficult to go through that because, you're Jermaine's son and you're playing his brother, which Jermaine is in the movie, well, not Jermaine himself, but of course is portrayed in the film, and you're just trying to be your uncle, who is the biggest pop star of all time, as a first-time actor. Incredible. Is just a monumental task to go after. And also, you got to try to sing like Michael, who has all the grunts and the pops and the just ad-libs and vocals. Everything that's also extremely powerful. Just nailed it in every aspect. Right now, he's my front runner for the Oscars. Like, we've still got quite a lot of films to come. Of course, we have the Odyssey and a whole lot more. But at this point, he's got to be the front runner.
Of all the films that we've seen, I would put him right up there with Ryan Gosling in Project Hail Mary. Like, I would put him in that category, which is a very good category and very good company to keep, because I can almost guarantee Ryan Gosling is going to get nominated for Project Hail Mary. I could certified stamp it today if I'm wrong. Roast me later, but I have a feeling he's going to be nominated at the end of the year, too. And this performance is right up there with it. Coleman Domingo absolutely deserves supporting actor love.
Absolutely.
And I think he'll get some of that love come awards time, too, as he should. But, there's so much good stuff coming up this year. It's going to be a very tough competition. I'm hoping it's going to be very tough competition this year. But so much good stuff coming up. I'm excited for that.
But this was definitely a hard one to look at because, as I said, in the theaters, just watching the movie and taking is what it presented to us as being a celebration of the music with bits of his life thrown in. Like I said, it feels more like almost like a concert movie more than a biopic, because it's just kind of, you get a little bit of the behind the scenes and then you jump into the next song, and then behind the scenes jump into a song, because it definitely felt more of that aspect. And if you take it as that, as a musical tribute to Michael Jackson, regardless of what you feel about the guy and what he may or may not have done, because again, not getting into that part of it,
sure,
they nailed the music. They nailed the performances. They nailed the highlights. This was definitely a greatest hits of the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson as a tribute to his impact on music in the world. And if you go into that aspect, it is a fantastic film to watch if you can look past everything else. Like I said, I took points off just because I couldn't. I loved it as the musical biopic, but you have to, if it is that aspect of it and not a concert film, then you got to kind of look at it as a way like, you glossed over some things you shouldn't have. And it just, I don't know how they do the second film. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of craziness. There's a lot of hard aspects, but there's also going to be a lot of, like I said, Janet Jackson wasn't a part of it because she didn't want to be. She was critical of the final cut, as well as Paris Jackson was, Michael's daughter. But if Janet doesn't want to be in the second part too, you're losing out on Scream and the stuff that they did together, and even mentioning in the stratosphere of Michael Jackson of what Janet Jackson did as an artist herself, you're losing all of that aspect of the life, because we know most of the other family members had much smaller kind of careers and roles outside of Michael and Janet. They were the two that really exploded and went off. And if you're taking Janet out of that, you're left with 3 albums and accusations and lawsuits and everything else, and it becomes really interesting how they're going to handle that. And I do want to see them go into like Black and White was kind of a controversial song because of the ending of it and some of the stuff that he did in the music video, but also going over to, Brazil and the favelas and filming there, which everyone told him he shouldn't do. And we briefly talked about it before we started recording that, yeah, he got protection because of just how big of a global superstar you had. The gangs over there were like, if anybody tries to harm Michael, you have to answer to us type of stuff. Like that just showed. And I hope they kind of touch and look at that aspect of it, of what it took to kind of do these bigger productions, especially Black and White was such a insane video that he did. But a lot of those songs, especially going into that era of his life, was definitely hitting in a lot of different other areas of how he felt about himself and the world and how people are treating each other and everything like that. So it can get pretty heavy, and it's going to be realistic to see how they do that, especially with the Jackson family having kind of control over it. What are they wanting to see portrayed by and stuff? We know that Joseph has passed away and Tito's passed away, so you've got many of the kids and mom, or mother as she's referred to by the kids and everything, like they're kind of in control of what gets done. And I want to see Smooth Criminal and Black and White and a bunch of other songs and other stuff, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about that second film, because it's not that I don't want to see the dark stuff. It's I'm worried about how they handle the dark stuff.
Yeah, and it's a fair criticism, and we'll see what happens when that movie gets made, and we'll see where they go with it, and we'll see what they touch on and what they decide to omit. And I can't wait personally to get that movie and talk about it as well, because, you know, we'll be even more harsh if they get a little too sugary with it, and we'll see, because it could very well be the case, and we'll be ready to react accordingly, and I'm looking forward to that. But Michael is in theaters now. Go check it out if you're a fan of Michael Jackson, the artist. You're going to have a great time. The music in it is phenomenal. The performances are incredible. Jaafar Jackson is absolutely fantastic as the king of pop here, and definitely a good time to be had at the theater. Go and hear those songs in a theater sound setting. Just go dance, sing along, and have a good time. It was definitely worth the watch.
So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you feel so inclined, do all the things to help the show out, from follows, shares, likes, and comments on social media to subscribing on YouTube and your favorite audio platforms. All of it helps us out so much, and we can't thank you enough for all the support.
You can also become a subscriber over on Patreon to get each episode delivered to you early, exclusive merch items, and your name read out at the end of every episode. Check it out at patreon.com/we'll bring the popcorn.
That's going to do it for this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.